1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Testing. Very good, thank you. Item E, it is recommended that the board
1, 2,
return
3,
to
1, 2,
open
3.
session. Can we have a motion?
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, we're now in open. Item F is approval of the minutes. We have minutes listed for the meetings between April 8th and April 30th. You can do those under one motion, and if anybody needs to abstain, you can simply abstain as noted. Can we have a motion on item F 1 through 6?
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, second. Questions or comments on the minutes?
I'll just say I am going to vote on the public hearing on the 30th because I did watch the meeting, but I'll abstain on the closed because I wasn't there for the full closed session.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yeah, I abstain on, let's see, virtual public meeting, April 23rd. And I abstain from April 30th, the budget and the budget closed.
Thank you. Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Peak?
Yes.
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes, but abstain on number 6.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
Yes.
Mr. Chili?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item G is correspondence.
We've received correspondence from Steve Carlson, Christy Riegler, Jennifer Fowler, Lorianne Studley, Chris Rivera, and a request for a change in maternity leave. 2 more maternity leaves of absence requested, and Gina DeCristo indicating her resignation effective June 30th.
Very good, thank you. Item H is the president's report. So I will submit my report. Good evening. In such unprecedented and uncertain times for our nation, our community, and our school district, it's important for us to look towards the future for hope and reassurance. In this evening's President's Report, I hope to highlight some of the work that is happening here in the Vernon Township School District as our district looks towards the challenges and opportunities of the future. Our school district is working towards celebrating the senior class of 2020 with a live in-person graduation ceremony in the coming months. While we will remain in compliance with any guidelines set forth by the state, this is an important milestone in the life of a student, and it deserves to be recognized by our full school community. I commend our administration, high school faculty and staff, and senior class families and students for working towards this goal with optimism. The District Reopening Committee, made up of stakeholders from across our school community, is working with Ms. Davino and Dr. McKay to plan for that moment in time when we can once again safely welcome back students into our schools. Every teacher, administrator, faculty, and staff member and student that I know cannot wait for the day when we can return to going to school each morning. While our school district has done an incredible job in transitioning to virtual learning in such a short period of time, nothing can replace the relationships, sense of community, and exciting daily bustle of a school building. Here at the board table, we recently passed the 2020-2021 school year budget. We have now managed 3 consecutive years of significant cuts to our state funding, all while maintaining the vast majority of programs and high level of instruction that make the Vernon Township School District great. However, looking forward towards the future, our work is really just beginning. We know that there are more difficult years ahead of us. At our June work session, we will have a discussion item dedicated to what values and priorities should guide us in developing a multi-year financial plan for our district. In developing a comprehensive financial plan, we can be sure that we will come out the other side of this financial crisis a strong and resilient school district. Additionally, This board is exploring the development of a strategic plan for our school district, which would work in tandem with our multi-year financial plan. We are here to serve our students, and a strong strategic plan will set forth a shared vision for our schools, identify critical issues that we must work to improve on, prioritize clear goals for where we want to go as a district, and outline how we are going to get there. In doing all of this, we can better serve our town, our school community, and our students. There's a great deal of uncertainty in the world right now, and even here in our own town. However, with hard work, clear goals, and our eyes on the future, we will learn, grow, and find our way forward together. Thank you. That concludes my report for this evening. And item I, committee reports.
I have a finance committee report. The finance committee met on May 12th. I think the attendees were Natalie, Brad, were you there? And Mark and I, and as well as, oh, Justin, you were not there.
I was there, yes.
So who was missing? Natalie was missing. No, Mark was missing.
Mark was missing.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's so long ago. The items, and Steve and Karen were also, and Chuck were there. Items discussed were health insurance, expenses and stipends, expenses and savings as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. No decisions were made, but we discussed a lot of things. That's the end of the report.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll follow. Oh, you want to go, Mike?
It's Mark. Just real quickly, I'll just say negotiations is meeting again with the VTEA on June the 4th. That's
Well,
right.
okay, then I'll go. Special services met on April 29th, and who was there was Kelly, Mike, Brad, myself, Director of Special Services, and the Superintendent. And what we discussed was the parental busing for the parents who drive their children, which we ended up discussing in a public meeting since. We also discussed related services and what happens with them happening over Zoom. And again, that was also discussed at a public meeting. We talked about the finance and support services and different aspects such as health services, other support services, things of that. And discussed ESS and moving along with it, and ESY, CST. And overall, it's a very productive meeting. Unfortunately, the meeting after that, we had to cancel due to scheduling, and we will be meeting again this Wednesday morning. So looking forward to it. Thanks.
So I'd like to chime in on a district reopening meeting that we had on Tuesday, May 9th. This is an opportunity for Justin and I just to sit in on the plan that a lot of people are coming together to try to plan for the district reopening, hopefully sometime in September. So it's a really comprehensive group. I won't list everybody. It's 20 plus members, consisting of a central office, business, building principals, directors, guidance, special education, the teachers, staff, including nursing, food service, as well as athletics, union representation, and finally parents, another key component to our educational community. So Chuck is the chairperson of the committee, so he led with a brief overview of the closing procedures, just because you know, everyone is involved in this committee. Chuck thought it was important to go over some of the closing procedures, trying to maximize safety. There will be no one entering the buildings. Everything will be bagged and dropped off in people's vehicles with very minimal contact. And a few of those are being planned in a couple phases, because students not only need to pick up things, but also need to drop off books, instruments, athletic uniforms. So it's going to be quite a coordinated event with door monitors, RPOs, custodial staff, obviously maximizing safety. So that's a great plan. Then Dr. McKay transitioned to developing action items for a number of subcommittees. So everybody's charged with developing a plan for fully in person to fully online and everything in between. So quite a monumental task. The committees really should identify problems and offer solutions, anything that they can think of with any scenario that we'll have to deal with, because as Karen alluded to, the directives from the state are kind of lacking. We don't know what social distancing, what testing things are going to need to be put into place. So we have to really plan for a lot of different scenarios. Obviously, putting safety first and then maintaining that excellent educational experience for our students. So, those overarching goals. So I'll highlight a few of the subcommittees. So health and safety is concerned with personal protective equipment, gaining thermometers to do temperature testing, and how that'll all work with the onboarding and offboarding of students. But we don't really know what that's going to look like, given the social distancing requirements that may come forward. I'll combine online curriculum and instruction with traditional curriculum and instruction. So that's two subcommittees. They're looking at blended learning models, having a lot of instructional design and support, and utilizing the excellent teachers that we have in our district with experience in those areas to help the larger faculty. Looking at reviewing curriculum updates that need to happen every year, and in particular, trying to determine meaningful assessments in any online or virtual scenario, and especially focusing on benchmarks. So how do we come into the school year and assess our students and determine improvement? The special education subcommittee was mainly concerned with assessments and benchmarking, as well as compensatory services when we return. Facilities is concerned with social distancing and cleaning procedures. So how are those cleaning procedures going to proceed while children are present, and then after they leave and prepare for the next day? Food services had to completely redo their menu. There would be no more food stations. Things like salad bars will be eliminated, and they'll strictly go to kiosk services with pre-orders, contactless payments, and they're addressing concerns about food safety and food preparation in the kitchen. And they're also concerned about the delivery of free and reduced meals for our students. Jennifer, I have all the notes typed up, so I should have told you this earlier.
Okay,
So I'll send that to you as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Transportation is concerned with cleaning the buses. They're looking into spraying the buses with a 24-hour treatment. So this 24-hour treatment is supposed to clear the virus for that time period, rather than having to clean the buses in between routes. So those scenarios are being looked at, looking at different bus routes with the social distancing guidelines that may result. So if it's 6 feet, how many bus routes would we need? If it's every other seat, how many bus routes would we need, and how many children can we safely transport? In addition, we'd like to coordinate with parents, trying to identify how many parents would forego the bus and kind of sort of help us out a little bit. And if the social distancing requirements are quite strict, and we'd have to transport fewer students than need to get to school in a timely manner. Athletics continues to be optimistic about the fall. They're playing with different scenarios for participating, talking about games on the weekends, talking about transportation issues with getting to those games. So that's an active discussion with the local leagues. Technology will be integral in assisting with curriculum and instruction and design. And then one thing that came up with the technology piece was cleaning of communal devices. So computers, things that students would need to utilize if there is in-person instruction, how those computer keyboards would be cleaned after each use. Parents was, the action item for the parents was communication. So hearing concerns, and then also relaying the ideas and the plan that we're trying to put with all these safety measures in place. So they'll utilize surveys to get that information out. And then finally, there needs to be buy-in by the entire community, faculty, administrative staff, so that everyone knows, what we're doing to try to maintain safety concerns, and then addressing concerns that our parents have, that our students have, and that our faculty have, so that we can hear every voice, so that everyone feels safe in hopefully a more normal fall semester or fall year. So that concludes that report.
Excellent, Michael.
Thank you.
Justin, I have a student life committee report if you'd like.
Please, you guys have been busy.
Yeah. So on May 6th, we had a full house at the Student Life Committee. I can't tell you how proud I am of this committee, Teresa, Jen, and Justin. It's just doing amazing things. And this meeting, we had some special guests. So we had Karen and Chuck, and also we had Glenn Meadows administration, as well as the high school's administration. And what a collaborative effort. It was 2 hours of thoughts and ideas, and the outcome was amazing. So I just, to have the opportunity to have a in-person graduation, if everybody is allowed to have that, I can't tell you the success of that meeting. It was enormous. And I thank Karen so much for the effort and for allowing me to have our special guests at that meeting. I can't even describe how I feel about that. So thank you, Karen. You are a superstar in my book. And thank you to my committee members, because we have been working so much for these end of the year celebrations. And I think that we're winning the race. So happy day. Oh, and the next meeting is June 3rd. So, tune in.
Yep.
Thank you. Are there any other committee reports? I believe that concludes our committee reports. So item J is public participation, and this public participation is for items on the agenda and any student comments. If those who are viewing the live stream would like to submit comments to the board to be read into the public record, you can type your comments into the live stream chat, and Mr. Shea will provide those comments to us, and I will read those into the record. Please share your name and part town, and we will make sure to submit all comments. We'll give you a few minutes to type your comments at this time. Matt, we need to get the Jeopardy music for when we're waiting here for like 2 or 3 minutes.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Can anybody whistle it?
No.
No.
My wife and I had the opportunity to look at all of the graduating seniors' pictures in the center of town that were put there by the compliments of Kelly Mitchell and crew. And my wife was a kindergarten teacher, and so she recognized a lot of the kids that she had in kindergarten, and it was just a very nice thing. It was really very nice. So thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I went there on Saturday with Sid. We walked the whole line. And when we were walking, 2 cars went by and we're tooting and waving and putting thumbs up. So it's really brought the community together very nicely, I think. I think the rest of the community does realize what these seniors are losing out on. So.
Mm-hmm.
Jeopardy.
I just realized I'm muted. There are no comments at this time, and Matt is playing the Jeopardy music for everyone. So good. We have a really advanced, high-tech production going here. Thank you, Matt. So with that, we will move on to item K, the superintendent's report. Ms. Davino.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nunziata and members of the Board of Education. Tonight, my superintendent's report, it was emailed to the Board of Education just earlier today. I will make sure that Jennifer receives it as well so that she can post it on the website. Thank you. The following items will serve as updates and points of information for the Board of Education and the Vernon Township School District. A brief graduation update, although we've touched upon it a little bit here this evening. We are excited that caps and gowns have been delivered for our class of 2020. I will tell you that some other districts in Sussex County are still awaiting caps and gowns. So we are really pleased that our graduates will have them for graduation. We are still awaiting honors cords that the graduates wear around their necks, as well as senior t-shirts and yearbooks. But once everything arrives, the high school administration will arrange a safe pickup of items so that all students can receive what they're entitled to for graduation. The virtual celebration of the class of 2020 end of the year video is being compiled. That will be shown on June 30th, only if we are unable to have a live ceremony. Remember, June 30th is our date for a live ceremony with modifications. As our parents and community are aware, we are still planning a live non-traditional graduation within appropriate parameters. We have to follow the measures of what we've been given by the state and the prosecutor's office and local law enforcement on June 30th or on August 5th. So we're really hopeful that in the next few weeks that we will continue to have hope for our families and we can have that live graduation on June 30th for our seniors. On the signs, just as a sidebar, I also wanted to mention on the signs that Mr. Sweeney mentioned and Mr. Sparta mentioned, I was on a call the other day with a superintendent from another town in Sussex County, and he said, my goodness, those signs in Vernon are beautiful. And it was really quite wonderful to hear him recognize Vernon in front of the whole county. And I said, thanks to Kelly Mitchell, one of our board members, and I know Justine Van Blarkum, one of our parents, some other folks have been really instrumental in putting the signs there. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, they really are beautiful.
And the mayor changed the name of the street from Main Street to, was it 2020 Senior Way, something like that? It's really nice.
How wonderful. We're very lucky to have that connection with our community. And a brief prom update. Again, I wanted to thank Kelly Mitchell, board member. She's been in contact with Joe Hessen from Mountain Creek. Joe is a graduate of Vernon Township High School, which is wonderful that one of our business owners of Mountain Creek went to Vernon Township High School. He's actually offered to host the prom at the Red Tail Lodge. Mr. Hessen and Dr. Anderson have been speaking. Ms. Mitchell put the two of them together, and they've been speaking about the gift from Mountain Creek to the class of 2020. So on Monday, August 3rd or Tuesday, November 24th, Mountain Creek has been kind enough to offer a prom to the class of 2020. As you know, due to COVID-19, the previously scheduled prom had to be canceled. The prom will only be possible if social distancing guidelines change or if we have permission to do so. However, it does include an all expense paid prom celebration at Red Tail Lodge. Joe has also allowed the banners celebrating the class of 2020 to hang on the bridge that leads to Mountain Creek. Special thank you, of course, to Joe, to Kelly Mitchell for connecting Mountain Creek executives, Dr. Anderson, and for all of his support of the class of 2020 and our Vernon seniors. I think that's quite special. I also wanted to share a brief SOS update for folks at home who might be aware. The Vernon Township School District is part of the SOS, which is the Support Our Students Coalition. The coalition represents over 100 school districts in the state of New Jersey that were negatively impacted by the S2 funding of the state aid funding formula. There's a recent letter from SOS leadership that it's actually in its entirety in my report. I'm not going to read that tonight. I'm just going to touch on a few bullet points. But once my report is uploaded to the website, the public can read the letter in its entirety. But the summary of the document is pretty simple. The letter stresses the COVID-19 financial impact on the state. It also discusses the importance of the link between healthcare and finances in New Jersey, which was recently reflected through Senate President Steve Sweeney's actions regarding some health care proposals. The letter also talks about how districts adopted budgets in May, quite recently, using state aid figures that will most likely change after the pandemic revenue projections become clear. One of the things we are hearing about for the August 25th financial update from the governor is possibly a 10 to 15% reduction in state aid. If that occurs, then we will have to be ready for phase 2 of reductions. The letter also talks about seeking additional information on what flat funding means. The state has talked a lot about flat funding at the state level, but the letter urges policymakers and lawmakers that districts who already had the S2 reductions, that needs to be part of the calculation, and it would be unfair to calculate a flat funding formula without including the S2 reductions that have occurred to many of us. And of course, the letter concludes with an appeal for the state to fund all schools in the state serving the total of 1.4 million students. So I'm pleased that we're part of the SOS Coalition. I'm also pleased that they're continuing to have articulation with policymakers and lawmakers in regards to financial challenges that the state of New Jersey faces, not only during COVID-19, but throughout the future, close to the pandemic and however we resume to some sense of normalcy. I also wanted to share that similarly to the district reopening that Dr. Peak just spoke about, at the county and state level, the executive county superintendents have tasked the superintendents with a stakeholder analysis framework from the New Jersey Department of Education. The 6 key areas, I did talk about them briefly last week. They're facilities, governance, instruction, operations, technology, and wellness. And although the framework came from NJASA, the Department of Education has asked superintendents to report on those key areas. I found it really interesting because the categories in each area included items that we should be doing first, items that we're doing before schools open, and items to do when schools are open and operating, as well as action items, challenges, solutions, and the people responsible for carrying out the tasks. The hope is that the stakeholder analysis will help steer the Department of Education in how to respond to the local needs of our schools. My concern is that the analysis is an effort in futility because the opinions are quite vast at this point. The medical information, including CDC guidelines that I reviewed yesterday with some state officials, is ever changing. And right now we've only been presented with guidelines. However, I am collaborating to complete my portion of the analysis, but I'm also utilizing other methods to communicate the needs of our schools to the New Jersey Department of Education and the governor's office. I would be not really responsible as the superintendent if I were not communicating directly the needs of the Vernon Township School District. So I'm trying to be as much of an advocate as possible for the needs of our community and how we can best educate our children with some of the parameters that may be put in place in September, some of which Dr. Peak touched upon a few minutes ago. The last thing that I'll discuss briefly is that I do have one concluding parent support workshop to roll out on Friday, May 29th at 6:30 p.m. I co-hosted 2 parent support webinars earlier during the pandemic with a licensed therapist who provided some support for us in April. And this one will be on Friday, May 29th at 6:30. But this time the topics include resiliency and finishing the year strong, authentic learning opportunities out at home and outdoors. One of the things that I remain concerned about is as children shift into summer mode, we always have the summer slide where when students are not engaged in academic work, they start to slide back a little bit when we get into September. But this year we'll have both the COVID slide and the summer slide to be concerned with. So authentic learning opportunities and encouraging the natural inquisitiveness that children have will be one of the topics we talk about. We're also going to talk about mental health because a lot of our parents are struggling, not with providing support educationally. I think they've done a tremendous job in being partners with us in education, but we know that our community is struggling through some real financial challenges and continued health concerns. So things like unemployment and facing some of the challenges that I think will occur economically for us in the future are things we also feel are really important to touch upon. Other points that we're going to discuss are how to get some closure without an actual closure, right? I mean, school will be ending on June 10th, but our children will be unable to say goodbye to their teachers or to sign yearbooks or to get phone numbers of friends that they want to connect with over the summer. Camps are still kind of up in the air. So we're going to talk about closure without closure. We're also going to talk a little bit about a summertime of unknowns and how to continue focusing on the family structure and how maybe our community can find some strength in that. I coordinated the program. I'm not hosting it. I'm only hosting the Zoom session. But Teacher Coach is an affiliate of the district that we talked a little bit about last month. But Jamie Bricker is a keynote speaker and author and educator, and his wife, Carol Bricker, who's a retired educator, and she has experience as a resource teacher in special education, as well as a gentleman named Jack Barkley, who's also a retired teacher and administrator, will also be on the call. Jamie and Carol Bricker run a podcast called Bricker by Bricker. They're content experts for Teacher Coach on parent engagement. So I'll put together a flyer and a Zoom link that will go out to the community shortly. We did not record those sessions in the past in case people felt that there were things they wanted to share confidentially. And we likely will not record that for the future, but that really isn't something that we've had any detailed discussion on. I'm excited, though, to have one final parent support webinar workshop for people as we close the school year and move into the summertime. I know that Dr. Peak covered the district reopening committee. I think he did an outstanding job. I did want to ask if Dr. McKay had anything he wanted to add in regards to the district reopening from his seat as the chair of that committee.
No, Michael did Dr. Peak did a wonderful job of reiterating. Many of the committees that were charged on Tuesday have already responded. Transportation's meeting with the bus companies this week to discuss some of those options. Our nurses are starting to order all of the PPE equipment that they can and getting that through Steve's office. And the curriculum work will be done this summer and paid for by the CARES grant. So you'll be seeing some of that being posted in the next couple of days. We posted a lot this morning as well. And again, we'll be having our faculty in based on that grant work. So things are moving very quickly.
They are. Thank you, Chuck. That concludes my report. Justin, may I continue?
Yes, item 2 is recommendations.
Letter 2A, it is recommended that the board approve the following faculty, staff, resignations, retirements, terminations, leaves, transfers, assignment changes, appointments, stipends, salary adjustments, student teaching, mentoring as listed. For the members of the board, the table begins at the bottom of page 3 and continues onto page 4.
We have a motion for recommendation 2A.
Ability to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments on the recommendation?
I actually have a question. I was going over the list and I noticed the appointments for 6th period for the Junior Viking Success Academy. And I'm just a little confused because I just want to preface this by saying I obviously fully support our teachers, fully support our students. But as I'm looking at this and I added up the amounts to over $60,000, I'm not understanding why we're having a 6th period for teachers when it's an in-class resource program.
So,
Karen, you want to answer? You want me to answer?
I'll start with it and then Chuck will finish it. So the certification of the teacher who's the, I guess, the person who's running the program is running the program, but we also have to have content area specialists in for middle school delivery of instruction. So grade 6, 7, 8, we have to have teachers that have language arts, math, science, social studies certification to support the academic needs of our students. Therefore, we have to have language arts, math, science, and social studies, which is what you're seeing reflected on the agenda.
Right, but what I don't understand, this is, I'm just asking from a special education perspective, in-class resource is where there's a gen ed classroom and students who have special needs travel into a general education classroom, and there's already a content teacher teaching, and then you have the gen ed teacher there. So then if not, are these kids then traveling together? Like, this doesn't make sense from an in-class resource perspective. These teachers would already be teaching, and then the students would be going into their classes, it would be in their schedule. But then last week it was mentioned it was a behavioral and academic program. So I'm looking at this and I realized that ESS was taken out of the budget and this was what's supposed to replace it, but it's just not adding up.
I'm not sure that I understand the question about
Okay,
why there's,
my question is, in-class resource, we have never supplied a 6 period for an in-class resource before. Because the way in-class resource works is there's a general education class, let's say 25 students, and you have your content, your certified content teacher. Then you have a student who in their IEP has in-class resource. Well, then what happens is when the bell rings, that student goes into a classroom, and the resource is the gen ed teacher who's in that classroom. So to add a 6 period, I'm not understanding, because this is not how in-class resource works. I'm not understanding why you would need to add a 6 period for these teachers. Because in-class resources, the teachers would just be teaching during their normal schedules. And then the bell would ring and the students would move and go into a classroom. And then there would be a special ed teacher and the content teacher there teaching. So I'm looking at this $61,000, which Mark had mentioned in the past, we had discussed, but it just doesn't make much sense. And then I didn't understand how last week it was a behavioral plus academic, because in-class resource is not a behavioral program.
so the program, the program is, it's a proposed class on a continuum of services, right? It's there to provide the least restrictive environment for general ed and special education 6th through 8th grade students. And, it also meets some of the response to intervention, the multi-tiered system supports that we've talked about before.
Right, and I get that, but I'm going on the 61,000 of 4 teachers. This would, if you have a classroom and you're having teachers go into a classroom who are content specialists, who are certified in your 4 cores, then that would not be an in-class resource program. That would either be a behavioral disabilities program, or it would be self-contained, or a self-contained behavioral disabilities program. I'm just not understanding how this is lined up. And then now we're paying, and again, I fully support our teachers. This is nothing against the teachers. And I fully support our students. So that's not where this conversation is going. I'm just not understanding the shift of how we're paying a 6 period. And also there's no 6 period for a case manager or for any type of mental health component, social worker, school psychologist, any one of that component.
Right. So we do have a counselor who's
now, is this a licensed counselor or just a guidance counselor?
No, we talked about that. This is my recommendation was that we are shifting away from a licensed mental health practitioner, right? We're not using an LAC or an LPC for this particular
social worker. Okay. Just
right.
because what's confusing me, and I just want to make sure this is put out there, because I'm looking at this and ESS was canceled. So that was taken off to balance the budget, which I disagreed with. I missed that meeting that night. I had no electricity. I couldn't join the meeting. So then it was decided this program would be put in place and it would be an in-class resource. But now that I'm looking at the agenda, adding teachers for a 6 period is not an in-class resource, because these 4 teachers would just be teaching their classes. The bell would ring and the students would just go in. But if that's not the case, and last week it said it was a behavioral plus academic program, then that would be a behaviors disabilities program.
It's not a program though. It is an ICR model,
okay,
which can serve general ed and regular ed.
Right.
Right. So we also
do these students move around? Does the bell ring and they just one goes into one class and or are they all being contained in one class? Because then that would be a self-contained.
No, it's not a self-contained program. We have a teacher of students with disabilities who supplies the supports and modifications, and the certified teachers provide the other content area specialist.
Right. I mean, I understand that. That's not even my question. I understand what a special education teacher does. I understand what a certified content teacher does. I was just trying to get to the bottom of this. Doesn't make sense from an educational special education perspective, the $61,000 to have teachers do a 6 period, because then that would mean, would the teachers be going into the classroom then if the students aren't moving, then that's really not an in-class resource. So then that would mean these students can't join the regular gen ed classes going on.
So, I mean, for the purposes of the meeting, although I can continue to try to answer the questions. We know we've got an upcoming special services committee meeting coming up. I know that we presented this VSA program and executive session discussion on April 23rd. I'd be happy to discuss it further. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to answer the questions that you're asking. I think we're seeing the same thing from two different perspectives. The program, and I have been clear about the moving away from the mental health services in this particular program. It doesn't mean that there will be no mental health services available for any of our students next year. In fact, one of the things we talked about through some of the CARES money and the grant money that's coming through from the state is a closer attention to trauma-informed care and to utilize some of that money for specialists throughout the district, because we do need to have some support for our students. One of the other things we talked about, although I understand the cost of the 6-period stipends, but the other thing we talked about was should the need arise, the opportunity to hire a consultant as an LAC or an LPC to provide additional mental health services for our children as needed.
Right.
One of the reasons we created the program was based on academic need. And we do have children that fit the need that are both classified and not classified, regular and in general ed.
Right. So then that's just I just have to say, I mean, because I'm looking at a $61,000 expense, and I'm just saying to myself, from an in-class resource, I would be remiss to not mention that this doesn't make much sense. And I understand what you're saying, to hire a consultant. Again, that's something I disagree with, but I'm obviously the minority on that.
Teresa, I'm sorry. You might have missed the conversation when we had that. I apologize. I don't know if it was the meeting you were present at or not. It's not a full-time consultant with benefits. We're talking about it.
That's my concern. I do believe that these students should have a therapeutic component, because you can't take an ESS program, which is therapeutic, drop the program for the budget, and then put something together without still meeting a therapeutic component. Again, I understand I'm the minority, and I know that was discussed in the past, but I'm just looking at the $61,000 and seeing that there's also, I was under the impression there would be a case manager, or there would be someone to be able to oversee and work to meet with these students, like an LDTC from the academic perspective, but I'm not seeing that added in that for the 6th period. So we can go back and discuss it. I mean, this is the whole reason I wanted this discussed with the full board, because in-class resource is a full gen ed class. You would have a large regular class, gen ed, and then students would go in there to have their needs met. If not, if the teachers are going in to meet the students, then that, from a content area perspective, that's all I'm questioning, because to pay $61,000, again, fully support our teachers and fully support our students, it's just concerning to me, because I'm looking at that saying that's not a in-class resource model. It sounds more self-contained or behavioral. So, I mean, that's all I wanted to bring up.
Right. We did. I did share information with you about, the case manager and school psychologist responsibilities at Glen Meadow Middle School, and the responsibilities that she would have as far as academic and behavioral support. That was shared with you. I'm sorry if it didn't meet the needs of your inquiry. So I can certainly delve into that further if you'd like.
Fine. My question right now, just going on, because I know we have to move on, it's just a 61,000, and just looking at the makeup of this and just wondering how it makes sense. That's all. But we can discuss it further. I just wanted to be on the record that I'm questioning this format without, making sure I support the teachers, I support the students, but most importantly, I, support our students and their student achievement.
Right. I understand.
Just asking the question, do these appointments need to happen at this meeting, or would it be better if there was further discussion and clarification between Karen and Teresa before we move forward?
Mr. Mino?
I'd prefer to keep them on the agenda.
I mean,
Okay.
feel free to keep them on the agenda. I brought up my concerns repeatedly and the rest of the board wasn't concerned, but now that I'm looking at $61,000 and seeing that it's a 6 period and how it's lined up, I just had more questions that I'm just not really understanding the components. So Mark, feel free to keep it on, because these are all the issues I've raised all the way through. And, I'm just the minority on this and my concern.
Well, I don't think that you're the minority, Teresa. I think that maybe the board wasn't completely educated on what you had to say. So, I think that we should have further discussion just so that we're completely educated with our decision, with our vote. That would be my thought.
The reason that there are 6 periods as opposed to being fit into the schedule was finished. Everybody had a full schedule. These are recommendations that have been made by Ms. Gebhardt for the best possible people for the program that she has created. And therefore, that's why it's the additional piece. So we posted for this for that VSA program. And these are the people that she has chosen.
I'm not as versed in special education as Teresa is, but in an executive session, we heard the Viking Success program plan. It was incorporated with the 6 period stipends. It was developed by the professionals at Glen Meadow, Rosemary, Deb Merrill, and at least how it was presented to me, it seemed to be a good plan to try to meet the needs of some students at Glen Meadow.
Mike, I agree, but my concern was I really didn't have answers to a lot of my questions.
And and that's fair.
Special services,
right.
But again, that's why I specifically asked to have it discussed with the full board. And again, now that it's actually in print for the $61,000, again, it's just something I'm looking at.
So the determination will be up to Ms. Davino on whether to keep her recommendation as stands or to modify her recommendation.
I'd like to keep the recommendation as it stands.
Okay. Are there additional comments for this evening on the recommendation on the agenda? Okay. So
we did, Justin, I think we did say with Ms. Davino that this was going to be a pilot program that we were going to have, measurements along the way to see the effectiveness. So I think that was a discussion that really believes in, and that she would really like to go forward with and try. And certainly we would have updates and on the success of this program.
I agree, Kelly. I mean, you fuzzed out there for a minute, but I think it would be really good, to get updates on this program to make sure that it's working. And I think it should be included because since this is an in-class resource program, and that means it really involves the full board, not just special services. We can discuss it in the special services committee, but then the full board should be discussing it as well. And we should also be kept abreast of the number of gen ed kids and the number of students with IEPs. And I'm not sharing any confidential or personal identifiable information, but this was a big decision financially. And, one of the things that's interesting is we didn't really ever stop to consider that if, let's say, the program was done differently, let's say it was perhaps a BD program. Well, one of the things that's on the agenda is that you can charge tuition. So that's a revenue stream that could have been an interesting perspective. I know the district is doing everything we can to try to make revenue. So had it been looked at from a different perspective, it could have been a revenue stream. Unfortunately, as an in-class resource, we wouldn't be able to do that. So possibly not for September, because again, everything's up in the air when school happens. But then if we find it's success with the number of students, the number of gen ed students, special ed students, and we have a very nice mix and component, then the following year, looking at it and seeing if it would be a benefit for other students to be a revenue stream for our district and help our students with their achievement with meeting other students and growing it. So that's a good idea. I agree.
Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nada,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Item 2B, it is recommended that the board approve professional development travel that complies with the provisions of New Jersey statutes annotated NJSA 18A:11-12, attachment A on your agenda.
We have a motion on recommendation 2B.
Chili to move?
Mr.
Sparta,
Chili.
second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item C, it is recommended that the board approve the harassment, intimidation, and bullying, school safety, and random drug testing reports.
Can we have a motion on recommendation 2C?
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank
Item-
you.
Item D, it is recommended that the board approve the following for summer evaluations at the rate of $300 per evaluation.
Can we have a motion for recommendation 2D?
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments?
Quick question. I noticed some of the people who are on this list to do summer evaluations for $300 an evaluation are also on the ESY list or the CST list for the summer. So I'd like to make sure, this was a question we had a few years ago, that if someone is approved to work as either ESY or CST and they're making their per diem rate, that if they do an evaluation a day that they're getting paid, that they won't also make the $300 for an evaluation, right?
Right.
Yeah, the
Okay.
evaluation is, as you said, Teresa, yes, the evaluation is per evaluation. It is separate from any other employment that they may have, an ESY teacher, for example.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clarified because that came up, I don't know, about 2 years ago. So,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
Do we have any idea the number of evaluations?
That we anticipate for this summer, Brad?
Yes.
Part of the challenge is that, I mean, I hate to say it, due to the coronavirus, it's a little bit, it will be difficult to anticipate for this summer. I mean, Steve could probably check and see what we did last summer and the summer before. What the predictions are for this summer, we're not sure of yet because of the challenges that we're facing with COVID-19. It depends on if we're able to meet students face to face. You know, the evaluations are done not virtually. And the state is not, you know, the instruction for speech, for example, that's permitted virtually, but an evaluation for speech is not permitted right now to be done virtually. So an evaluation would have to be done live. So this is anticipated for the summer. I don't know if we will be able to do these things over the summer. They may be, some of them are already overdue. we are using a Google Doc within the department to categorize all of the services that we might need to provide as far as evaluations go. But it's almost impossible to predict right now.
What like last year, excuse me. Did we do like 220 or did we do 200?
I don't know. I could get that information to you or to the board, but I don't have that information tonight.
Steve, wasn't it 40 over the summer last year?
I think you're close, Mark. I didn't want to speculate.
I think you're confusing. It's $300 in evaluation, because an evaluation takes hours, and then the report, and then a meeting. If someone attends a meeting, that's $40 for the meeting.
Yes.
Right.
That was the difference. Yes.
No, 40 occurrences is what I meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. So meaning 40 evaluations.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yeah, I think Steve's checking. I mean, that could be right, Mark.
That's right. Because we recently discussed this and we did look into that, and it was about 40. So it was about last summer it was about $14,000 worth of evaluations last summer.
Sorry about that. 14,000 over the summer?
Yes. With 40 evaluations or so.
Okay. Are there any additional questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
It is recommended that the board approve the following for summer child study team meetings at the rate of $40 per meeting. And that begins, I'm sorry, at the bottom of page 5 for the board members. The table continues on page 6 toward the top of page 7 on your board agendas.
We have a motion for recommendation 2E.
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta.
Abstained.
Motion carries.
Item F. It is recommended that the board approve the following appointments for the 2020 ESY Extended School Year Program, which runs Monday through Thursdays and commences on July 6, 2020 through August 6, 2020 for a total of 20 days. Just a note for members of the board and the public, this is the current step and per diem rate for the 1920 school year. Once the contract is ratified, the steps and salary would be adjusted. Staff members will be compensated with the difference. Also, please note that as of now, ESY will be delivered virtually as per the Department of Education.
Thank you. Can we have a motion for recommendation 2F?
Chili move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question, and I'd like to thank the administration for this year making sure I sent out an email for that it's easy to follow in a chart, and I appreciate that as opposed to last year. So thank you for being proactive and putting that out. When I look through the amounts from the Special Services Committee perspective, for example, the summer team, I've begun to notice that every year our number of therapists and whatnot, related services and CST members are going up. And I was wondering why this year, if it's going to be virtual, extended school year is virtual, we can't do evaluations, and identification meetings would, I would think, be somewhat minimal, and they'd be done over Zoom. So that would be a meeting. I added up last year, and I noticed last year we had a social worker that worked with ESY and the CST. So that salary was a little difficult to include. And there was one person who worked and the hours were never added in, how many hours they did. So last year we had 60 hours, and I'm guessing 10. So let's guess the other one person that didn't have hours added. So let's round that up to 70. And without the social worker, it came to $19,005. Then when you add the social worker in who did the CST and the ESY, it came to $24,900 and change. But this year, when I looked at it to add it all up, I noticed that we're heavy on the LDTCs. We have 3 learning disability teacher consultants. We kept 2 school psychologists, and we went from 2 social workers down to 1. And then I noticed that it went up in cost to $27,356, and that was without the social worker. But when you add the social worker going between the 2, it comes to $33,000 for an increase of $8,300. And I was just wondering why, if ESY is virtual and their evaluations are going to be minimal, and like the identification. And then the other thing I was questioning, and this is another point I just didn't know, and I should have called in advance and asked this, but when I was looking at the job post for the extended school year, I noticed that it said 1 school social worker, 1 school psychologist, and 1 LDTC for approximately 25 days each. So I didn't know why we went up on cost and hours. We went from approximately 70 hours to 90 hours with about an $8,300 increase, but then it didn't match the job posting. So just so I know for future, are we allowed to, like, if you post the job like that, are we allowed to then change it? I'll start with that. That would be my first question.
I'll try to answer. I took a lot of notes about what you said, Teresa. So I hope that I captured some of those things correctly. I would say that
Wi-Fi is coming and going. So just so you know, it's a little lagging.
Okay. This year we're doing 70 days. Last year we did 75. I just wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I read hours, so I should say days. Okay, days.
Right. So
then when I added them up this year, it came to 90.
Right. And, and also these are also projected where, for example, some of the folks who are sharing, we do have a couple of positions and a couple of people, I'm sorry, in the same position, where they would be sharing. So if you look on the agenda, you have, one LDTC is doing 20 days, somebody else is doing 10 days. It doesn't mean that everybody's doing the entire time. It really does depend on the needs of the program. And these are all projections for the summer. I guess part of my question for your questions would be looking at the agenda from last year, which is where I think you were doing the comparative analysis, and then looking at the actual cost of last year might be a better way to do the comparison. For example, last year, the board approved a spending for ESY. And then when we do a look back, and Steve, of course, could, work his magic and do some calculations and figure out what our cost was of ESY, I wonder what the comparative spending would be versus the compared projection. Remember, like I said, ESY is virtual this year. We do have to approve people to have them at the ready, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will be utilizing everybody at full capacity. Part of that really does depend on a virtual rollout of a program that has never been done virtually before. We do need to be prepared to provide these services for our families.
All right, great. And you brought up a really good point. So that's a great idea. So then what we should do, and in, let's say, the September meeting, that was a great idea, that we should get a comparison of what we projected versus what was used. That would be a great idea, especially now with the virtual, because who knows with what this will bring. But then my other question was, and this is just an overall question so I know for the future, if a job posting says you're hiring one school psych, one social worker, one LDTC, and it says approximately, because I get it, that's a projection, 25 days. And then we're allowed to go and break that up.
Well, it also depends on who applies, Teresa. So for example, if no other social worker wanted to work this summer, for example, so that's why we only have, and sometimes people apply and say, I'll apply, but I'd like to apply for 20 days, or I'd like to apply for 10 days. They don't necessarily have to apply for 30 days. So, or I don't mean 30 days. They don't have to necessarily apply for the maximum ESY or for the maximum posting. Some people have family obligations over the summer and can't necessarily commit to the entirety of the program, but we want to allow flexibility because we need people with we need them to provide services to our children. And as long as we're covering the needs for the children, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same person for the entire amount of time.
Gotcha. Thank you. So then that's helpful to know for the future, because then that's another component that would be really helpful to find out. Like, for example, I would guess there has to be, when the person replies to the job post, they would have to put in some sort of writing, you know, how many days they wanted to do. And then that way you could look at, break it down. So that's another good point that we could look at for projecting and seeing, you know.
Yeah, and that's something just to clarify that, you know, all of the postings go through Dr. McKay's office as the assistant superintendent in charge of personnel. You know, he responds to all of those items of interest that come from people who are applying, and that's for any position, whether it's for a coaching position. The board members know that there are some coaches who share head coach stipends or other, you know, co-curricular opportunities. So it's not uncommon to find teachers that work collaboratively in order to support each other and to support the students. And that goes through Chuck's office. He handles that, and that's how things end up on the agenda the way you see them.
And maximum hours are approved. Oftentimes, if they're not used, we would have, I think, a far more accurate look would be what we spent.
All right, I agree. So that would be a great idea. So then in September, Chuck, if you could let us know, you know, let's say even for the
Do a
special
comparison
services,
between
and I can
spending
report
last
back
year.
to the full board, find out who's looking to apply and how many hours do they want to do. So that would give us a better idea to guide in the future and to really help our students. So thank you. Thanks for the explanation.
I just want to clarify the question, though. The board won't be receiving information on what people are applying for in terms of hours and things like that, right? That's not your question, is it?
No, I'm not interested in like specifics, like who applied for what, but instead using the data of the title, like which positions wanted to apply. So that way we would know in the future to make our programs better, because from the special services, one of the things that's part of the goal for the special services from the district end is seeing what programs meet our students' needs. So making sure that our ESY program, that it's thorough and efficient, and that we're using, you know, broad-based data. I don't want individual people by any means, more just title-based.
We'll be able to put an hourly chart together without using names.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That would help a lot. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri, Mrs.
You're muted.
Bucieri,
You're muted.
Natalie,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item G, it is recommended that the board approve and submit the district closing plan due to the recent pandemic due to the county office. Attachment B.
Can we have a motion on recommendation 2G?
Chili to move.
Chili, second.
Second, Sparta.
Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can
Report goes to the county office tomorrow.
okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, please have a roll call vote.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 8, it is recommended that the board approve the following employee rehire as part of the personnel report for the 2020-2021 school year as noted on the agenda.
We have a motion for recommendation 2H.
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, a second.
Sparta, second.
Sparta, question or comments?
Actually, I do have a question. You know, I listened to Mike's update on the committee and the reopening committee and all the different things that would need to be possibly met. And I'm sure we all saw those CDC guidelines right now
Yes.
for school openings. And I thought how expensive it will be, how restrictive it will be, and would we even be able to open? With, you know, the busing alone, you know, was something that boggled my mind, right? I'm sure you all looked at that busing requirement and thought, how, you know, even if there was enough bus drivers, how would we have the budget? Is the state going to provide funding? So while I don't disagree that we would possibly need another nurse, are we jumping the gun now, approving this? What if we don't open in September and we've committed to another full-time position? You know, if we open in September and we have to comply with all of these guidelines, I agree. We need the nursing staff, and I don't want to, you know, diminish the importance of our school nurses by any means. Are we just committing to a salary where there's so many unknowns? Because, you know, I don't know. When I saw those CDC guidelines and I heard Mike's conversation and all those things, at this point, are we convinced that we will open in September? And then have we approved this salary and might not need it till October, November, who knows?
I think I'll start and then I'll ask Chuck to continue.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, it's so hard to say what will happen in September, right, Natalie? I don't disagree with you at all.
That's my point.
Yeah, I understand. I do think that, well, we will be working in September, right? Whether it's virtual or hybrid or whatnot. I think it's too soon to tell. I will tell you that the large focus of the wellness component that I'm seeing, not just through the CDC, but through the things from the state, are everything from, you know, thermometer checks and PPEs and what happens if a child comes to school and they're showing symptoms and they have to be cared for. So the medical piece with this pandemic is something that we've never seen before. So I think that's why we went in the direction we went in with the recommendation to the board of aligning or allocating a salary toward a nurse as opposed to toward a teacher. Because right now in the fall, we know that what we can do virtually, we don't know what we can do medically. And I think that was one of the reasons that weighed on our minds when we started to consider this recommendation. Chuck, do you want to continue?
Sure. The committee would absolutely advocate for this extra position because they're concerned about temperature checks when the students come in. Natalie's point is absolutely critical, which is because of all the unknowns, what do salaries look like next year and what do contracts look like next year? And no one really has the answer, and we're looking for direction from the state. So there are people during this time that are working 12 hours a day. There's other people that may not be working as many hours. So these are questions that we really have, Natalie. They're very good questions. And when the CDC releases what they released, I know what report you're reading from. It's a situation where they're really going to have to let go of the reins a little bit if we're going to be able to open the way we would like to open. And that's why we're doing the 3 levels of what an opening would look like. But the committee itself believes that the extra nurse is needed.
Is the nurse a 12-month position or a 10-month position?
10-month.
So that really speaks to my point then. So, I mean, we could put this on the agenda for next month if we know we're definitely going to open in September, because right now she won't be doing any support to help get us to that point where we open. So again, I fully support, I want everyone to hear that, our nursing staff, and if we need to keep our students healthy, our staff healthy, and take those precautions, I just think we're jumping the gun committing to a salary that we're not going to use in June, July, or August. And who knows if we will use it in September if we open or not. And once we have more guidelines from the state, from the CDC, I think we can, I think this recommendation would be better in June, July, August, when we know better, because there are so many unknowns, but we are committing to salary and benefits, and we might not even open our doors in September.
One of the problem you may run into is, if she hasn't started yet, she will tomorrow, is she's going to look for a job and you lose her, and there is a shortage of nurses. And I would wonder that if school districts, especially in this time, are going to be grabbing up available nurses.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
I'd like to keep her on for approval. I have written a letter of recommendation for her as she looks for a job, and I know that there are jobs out there, and I'm really quite taken with this person. I think that she's really terrific, particularly with younger children and assuaging their fears. So I'd like to keep it on there, but I do want to state about what Natalie's saying. We may have an August meeting or a July meeting, and we start to talk about what all this might look like and what we're going to need and what we don't need.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally trust your judgment, as far as hiring this particular person, Chuck. It's not a reflection on the person at all.
It's
not a reflection on the person at all.
No, I'm not saying that either. No.
Yeah, so I just think it's jumping the gun for so many unknowns.
Wasn't this additional nurse supposed to be part of COVID-19 funding?
Is there COVID-19 funding?
There's COVID-19 funding, but her salary's not in there.
Could it be?
No, we have it. We're spending it on everything else.
Okay.
All right. So is this nurse hired back, or is this a new hire? Is this a new position?
This is a person who is on our staff. She got bumped from the closing of Walnut Ridge.
However, I think
she was not in Walnut Ridge. It was just based on seniority.
Yeah, I think we talked about the kind of the paying for this position last week.
Yeah, I understand.
What was that? We talked about
we paid for this position with a transfer. We transferred a math interventionist back into the classroom to cover maternity leave for the year.
Okay, all right.
Net zero.
Yeah.
Right. Not speaking about the individual, I do hear Steve's point, and that would be my concern, that the availability of finding people in the nursing profession during the pandemic. I don't have any data to back that presumption up, but I would think that there will be other districts that may be hiring if we are going to be reopening in September.
Yeah, I think that's a concern.
Are there any other questions or comments on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Chili?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Peak?
Yes.
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sparta?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata?
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri?
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item L, or Mr. Vino, does that conclude your report for this evening?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Item L is the Business Administrator's Report. Mr. Kepnes.
Okay, number 1A, use of buildings and grounds. For your information, we just have one group lined up for class pictures next September and then October, assuming we're back. Letter C, I did just want to ask if the board has any interest in changing the June meeting dates. As a reminder, we have the 3rd and the 11th. Wednesday is the 3rd in June and Thursday is the 11th. We could keep it as is. The reason we did it so early was so that we don't conflict with activities that were going on that are no longer going on. So we could now do it later in the month, which would be the 11th, and I believe it would be the 18th.
Don't we have a student life? Oh, okay, that's.
On the
June
3rd, yes, which I wanted to have this conversation before we did anything with changing.
That's at 3:00.
Yeah, I forgot.
And I promise
Sorry.
not to be lengthy at that meeting, which
I'm
is hard.
comfortable with the dates as they stand personally, but you know, we can see what the majority feel.
Good either way.
I'm fine either way.
I'm fine too.
Whatever the administration wants, I'm available.
Karen, Chuck, I think maybe we just leave it as is since everyone's planning accordingly anyway.
All right.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Is there a need to change it that you know of?
Not particularly. It's just the next meeting, there's one meeting in July. So it will be a long go until your next meeting, which
You'll miss.
what were we discussing? I think there's really no harm in leaving it as is.
Mhm. We'll just provide updates to the board.
Yeah, if the board's okay with that. Okay. Recommendation number 2. It's recommend the board approve the following financial reports as listed.
We have a motion on recommendation 2A.
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Coughlin,
I abstain from check noted.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes, abstain on check noted.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Ms. Jerry,
Yes.
Mr. Chili.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Letter B, it's recommend the board accept the report of the secretary and the treasurer of school monies closing out the month of April.
We have a motion on recommendation 2B.
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Are there questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter C, it's recommended that the board approve the contracts listed in the chart for tuition of students who were sent to these other districts. Yeah.
We have a motion for recommendation 2C.
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter D, it's recommended that the board approve the list below for the professionals that will be utilized during the 2021 school year.
Can we have a motion for recommendation 2D?
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta, second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? These begin on page 10 and they continue until page 17, right?
Oh.
12.
It's broken up, Justin. It goes to the top of page 12.
Just as a comment, I just want to say that every single year I abstain because some people on this list are my colleagues. So therefore I abstain and I will again this year, so everyone knows.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes, but abstain on Hackensack Medical Center.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Tilly,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Abstain?
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Hey, Mike, you might want to abstain on Sussex Ed Services.
Oh, geez. Good call, Brad. I will abstain on Sussex.
I'm just used to doing it. That's why I saw
Right.
it.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Letter E, it's recommended that the board approve the resolution for reappointments designations listed for the next several pages for the 2021 school year.
A motion for recommendation 2E.
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, a second.
Second, Sparta.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? And these go to page 16.
Correct.
No questions or comments. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Tilly,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter F, it's recommended, bottom of page 16, letter F, it's recommended the board approve the service agreement with Teachers Pension for the purpose of providing retirement and financial literacy education, as well as 403B investment opportunities to district employees.
We have a motion for recommendation 2F.
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, a second.
Sparta, second.
Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Tilly,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Letter G, it's recommended that the board approve the food service addendum renewal for the 2021 school year with Sodexo for your food service company.
Can we have a motion for recommendation 2G?
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, a second.
Sparta, second.
Questions, Mr. Sparta, questions or comments?
I
I'm
was just,
gonna go ahead, Teresa.
no, I was going to add that last year, the ad hoc food services committee came through and went through different food services, and we came to the conclusion last year that Sodexo offered us the best across the board, and it seems to be that way every single year. And we work very well with them, so I just want to throw that out there for everybody so that they know.
Also that they were there for our free community dinner, free of charge to us, and they came and volunteered their time and efforts, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Tilly,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. It's recommended, letter H, it's recommended the board amend the resolution related to cancellation of parent transportation contract reimbursements by limiting that cancellation of reimbursement to be limited to the period April 1st to June 30th. Ultimately, you would be two things. You would not be recouping any payments from the second half of March. And in addition, those few parent contractors who did not get paid for the second half of March, we would honor those payments.
We have a motion on recommendation 2H.
Chili to move?
Mr. Chili, second.
Sparta second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Bucieri,
Yes.
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
No.
Mr. Nunziata.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Letter I, it's recommended that the board approve renewing the contract with Horizon as the health benefits carrier starting July 1st, 2020 through the 2021 school year.
Can we have a motion on recommendation 2I?
Chili to move.
Mr. Chili, a second.
Sparta second.
Mr. Sparta, questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Chili,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Peak,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sparta,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Nunziata,
Yes.
Mrs. Bucieri.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Item N is public participation, and this is for items on the agenda or any other business. If those viewing the live stream would like to submit comments to be read into the public record, please type your comments into the chat. Please share your name and part of town, and Mr. Shea will share those with the board, and I will take a minute to read those into the public record. Cue the Jeopardy music. Okay, it looks like there are no comments this evening. So seeing no comments, we will close it to the public and move on to open board member forum, item N. After open board member forum, there will be an additional executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel matters.
Justin, I think I was remiss when I was talking in committee members. I just wanted to say that I left out two key members of my committee, and that would be Tara Brennan and Lindsay McAloney. They're amazing members, and I think that when I was doing the roll call of the members, when I was giving the committee report, I left them out. So I would never want to do that. They are amazing, and I count on them very much. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Thank you. We want to make sure that we give the full committee credit because you guys are doing a lot of great work right now. Okay, do we have any other open board member forum comments for this evening? Okay, so we'll close it to the board and we will add will actually be an executive session, and that will be for the purposes of discussing personnel matters. It will probably be about a half hour, and action will not be taken when we come out. Can we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Mr. Sparta, second.
Second.
Ms. Bucieri, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are in close. Matt, if you could turn